Hi, welcome to Bari Nation, where we support the bariatric community with humor, humility, and honesty.
You've just tuned into a podcast that welcomes you into a community, a resource center, and a safe place that powers your journey towards personal wellness.
Our goal is you leave us today feeling hopeful, inspired, and ready to live your best bariatric life.
Hi, Bari Nation. It's April. We are thrilled to be bringing you a very special conversation with a very special person. I don't think you have probably ever met or heard Dr. Ponce speak, but today we're going to take a deep dive into the disease of obesity with him. Dr. Ponce is one of the world's most respected bariatric surgeons and obesity medicine specialists, and somebody who absolutely advocates for patient needs. There was a recent report that came out called the Lancet Report, and it recommends that we move away from BMI and focus more on the comorbidities and the lifestyle impacts that obesity can have on people's lives. And one of the big messages that Dr. Ponce wants to deliver in this episode is that regardless of whether or not you are officially diagnosed with obesity, if you battle with excess weight, you deserve medical treatment. He also talks about the power of our stories and how they can influence people's decision to finally onboard meaningful medical treatment. And even if you are not yet in a place in your own life or in your own journey to share your story publicly, that's okay. Start sharing your story with yourself, because eventually that one person is going to bump into you in the universe and they're going to need to hear what you have to say. And if you're familiar and if you're comfortable and if you know your own story, you are going to positively impact the life of somebody else. So friends, sit back, relax, and I highly recommend that you watch this podcast episode on YouTube. Dr. Ponce is going to share some very interesting graphics that will help us better understand how the disease of obesity can be diagnosed in the future. All right, friends, let's dive in. Hi, friends. Welcome to the Bari Nation podcast. Today, I have the honor of interviewing one of the world's most influential, well-known, respected bariatric surgeons, Dr. Ponce. Welcome, Dr. Ponce.
Thank you, April. Thank you very much for having me here.
I'm thrilled to interview you. We have a packed discussion planned, but before we really dive into the conversation, will you please introduce yourself to our friends and watchers who don't know you?
Yes. So I'm a bariatric surgeon. I've been doing bariatric surgery since the year 2000. Been in the area of Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is in the border in between Tennessee and Georgia. Started working in a little town that is called Dalton, Georgia, and then moving to Chattanooga, Tennessee, develop an accredited center of excellence and accredited center in both places, and now focus more in the Chattanooga area. I also have involved in many clinical trials, a total of 11 of different obesity medical devices. Also been involved with the ASMBS, the American Society for Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery leadership, to the point that I became president of the ASMBS in the year 2012 to 2013. So it's already been a few years ago. But believe it or not, I was one of the youngest presidents of the SMBS. I think Phil Schauer was younger than me when he became president, and then myself. Then I also still very active with the SMBS. I'm in charge of the process that allows the bariatric surgeons to get certified by the American Board of Surgery only on metabolic and bariatric surgery, which is a new designation that the American Board of Surgery has. I am also an editor of the textbook of bariatric surgery. And so we're coming with a third edition now, and we're working on that and many other little projects. In addition to that, just a surprise, the SMBS, is part of a, world federation. It's like the United Nations, it's called IFSO, the International Federation for Surgery of Obesity and Metabolic Disorders. And so this federation has 77 countries in the federation. One of those is the United States, and one of those societies is the SMBS. And I'm also in the leadership of that federation. I'm just the immediate past president of the North America chapter. They have divided the world in chapters: North America, Latin America, Europe, Asia Pacific, in Middle East and North Africa. So they divided based on cultural more than geographic division. Potentially we're going to keep climbing on that leadership. We're in that leadership. So I'm happy to be here. I have the perspective not only of United States, but also the international perspective. And I think that's valuable. And I'm going to hopefully share with you and other patients that may be watching this, how important it is, their testimonial for all of us to create more awareness. I think that's very important.
I could not agree with you more. And as you were running through just all of the amazing work that you do, as patients, we know it can be easy to isolate and just focus on our story and maybe a few people around us. But when we do take a step back, we look at obesity from that global lens perspective. We patients share much more in common than what we think. The disease of obesity does not discriminate based on where we live or our gender, any of that. The experience is common across the board. So for you to have such a wide ranging viewpoint on this disease and how effective surgical treatment is just amazing.
Yeah, that's probably before we talk and get in depth into what is obesity, I wanted to tell your audience, and if your audience is made out of many former patients or some of them, I wanted to ask them and plead that you can make a difference, not only in the United States, not only in your town, believe it or not, you can make a difference in the world. And then you may say, do they have obesity in Australia? Do they have obesity in China? Do they have obesity in Europe? Yes, they do have a lot of obesity. Actually, a lot of these countries that used to have, like, for example, China used to have, 2-3% obesity a few years ago. Now they are up to, 10-15%. But for the number of population that they have, it's a lot of obesity that is growing. Why? Because they're adapting our Western culture. They like Kentucky Fried Chicken. They like the fast food. And so all those things can allow them to get into that. And their genetics is not any different. Actually, they have worse genetics in regards to getting sicker faster at a lower weight. So lower BMI, they get diabetes faster. They get more metabolic disease faster. The Asian population, which is very devastating. Yeah. So at a lower BMI, they already can be candidates for treatment because they are sicker and they get faster. They cannot tolerate the weight as much as the Europeans or Caucasians or even African Americans. African Americans, it's interesting, you will say, there's no obesity in Africa, but African Americans, when they come to America, there is a significant degree of obesity when they move into United States.
Wow. And that's just because, right, the genes are there, or the foundation has been laid for the disease. But there are all of these things that can occur within our life that will trigger the disease to turn on. And once it's there, that's when treatment is going to be something that you need to pursue.
Yeah, I think all those things are, many of these are hypotheses based on evolution, based on analysis of the genes. But if you think about it, certain cultures grew up with less resources, less food available over many, many centuries. And so, people that were in Africa, they probably did a lot of activity. They eat healthier and more fiber and less of that fatty, greasy stuff. And they probably didn't have as much food as some other cultures. And so their genes allows them to save more calories. So you bring those genes into a place where there's a lot of food available, well, they can store more calories much faster. So like Native Americans is the same thing. They do tend to develop diabetes early, and they do tend to get more metabolic disease early because their genes are not designed to withstand that much calorie intake that we have here.
Wow.
Some way, somehow the Europeans managed to handle that because over time they had more access to food. Their body probably adapted to that a little bit better. But regardless of that, we have just so much food, and this is the time in history in which we have more food available than any other time.
Yes. right? And I think more leisure time to enjoy food or to take in food. We're bombarded with food messaging constantly, all day, every day. It is a huge part of our culture here in the United States, but it's fascinating to have that global perspective on these different, right, populations within the world are still going to experience it just in different ways.
Exactly. Very different, very different.
Well, this is a perfect segue really into the first question I wanted to ask you, which is, why is obesity a disease? And is it important that people seek out kind of that clinical diagnosis of obesity?
This is so interesting. Obesity is been known to be a disease for many years. Unfortunately, many of our health organizations, the AMA, the American Medical Association, just recognized obesity as a disease in 2013.
Yeah.
So we're talking about 12 years ago, not that long ago.
Yeah.
That allowed to now we have physicians, we have a code that determines that obesity is a disease. And so we get paid if we see a patient with obesity and so on and so forth. But that's just the technicality. Many other associations over time, even the SMBS and many other organizations have determined that obesity is a disease. Why is that? Because it has all the clinical features of any other disease. It creates an imbalance in our body in which it does makes us feel sicker. I mean, just coming up with some simple terms.
Mm-hmm.
You have more body fat in your body, and that creates more sickness in your organs, and then that leads into a disease. And so for many years, we have tried to determine who is suffering from obesity by a simple measurement of the BMI. Everybody's familiar with the BMI, body mass index. Body mass index is the only thing that it tells you is that you have how much weight do you have per height.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. This is a formula that correlates the amount of weight that you have per height. But it doesn't tell you if the weight is coming from muscle. It doesn't tell you if the weight is coming from fat or from bone or from water. So what is the dangerous weight? Of course, the fat weight is the one that is dangerous. It's the one that creates the disease of obesity. So it's called adiposity, which is it's a Latin term to determine that this is related to fat. So many times we made an error because we can have a patient or a person with a BMI of 35, which in our terms, normal terms, a BMI over 30 is considered obesity.
Mm.
But this person is a bodybuilder, does a lot of exercise, has a lot of weight, but is based on muscle. That person is not suffering from the disease of obesity. But according to our definition that we traditionally have, it will be labeled as obese.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you asked this question because very recent, this past year, there was a Lancet commission. Lancet is a journal, it's a British journal, and they organized this commission of experts from all over the world, trying to change from a pure BMI definition to now define body fat content as a disease. Now, it will be very easy to determine obesity actually with a very fancy scan that is called a DEXA scan. So if everybody had in their clinic a DEXA scan, it would not be a problem. They had in their house a DEXA scan, okay, go to your DEXA scan and you determine how much you have fat, how much you have muscle and stuff. But that's not realistic. I mean, nobody has that scan in their access to them or in their clinics. It will be impossible to widespread that DEXA scan. But those are body composition complex scans that will determine the amount of fat that you have in your body. So we have determined that there are other simplistic ways of doing it. And so there's certain measurements in the body that can tell us how much fat do we have. So we can measure the waist circumference. And if somebody has men over 102 centimeters and women over 88 centimeters, that's considered already excess of fat, which puts you in the category potentially of your obesity being related to having a lot of fat on that weight.
Okay.
Second one is waist to hip ratio. So you measure the waist and then you measure the hip. The hip is the widest area of your hip bones. And the waist actually is the narrowest area in your torso, which is in between the rib cage and your hip. And so if you measure that ratio, the ratio of more than 0.9 in men and more than 0.85 in women is considered, the term is obesity because that's excess of fat. And then there's also another measurement of this body fat that is called waist to height ratio. So waist to height ratio. And so that one is more than 0.5, no matter if you're men or women. Now, the new definitions of the Lancet said, okay, we're going to make it very simple. If you have a person that you think that is suffering from obesity, you can do it two ways. You can calculate the BMI. And if they have a BMI of 35, then let's calculate one of these measurements to see if the weight is associated to fat or not.
Okay.
So for example, if they have a BMI of 35, and then on the other side, they have a waist circumference in men over 102 centimeters, that is obesity.
Okay.
But if the circumference is less than that, you cannot call that obesity. Okay.
Okay.
Second way of doing it, let's erase completely the BMI, is two of those measurements that I mentioned is already determined that somebody is obese. Wow. Independent of the BMI.
Yes.
So if somebody has two of those measurements, and even if they have a BMI of 29, it can be considered obese. Now, there are people that are overweight and you can see them not struggling too much with that obesity. And there are people that are struggling with it. I mean, they have more difficulties walking and shortness of breath and medical problems. So I'm going to introduce you to patients. If you allow me to share my screen, I'm going to introduce you to patients. This is very fun exercise here. This is Maria and Jack. Can you see the screen?
I can. And I'll just say, if you're listening to this podcast, friends, pause, head over to YouTube so that you can see what Dr. Ponce is sharing with us.
Exactly. So, and I'm going to describe it if you're just listeners. So Maria, I'm going to introduce you to this patient. Maria is a patient that was measured with a BMI of 37. So in general terms, she was determined to be obese, but she has zero symptoms, meaning that she feels fine. She has a normal heart, normal lungs, normal kidney functions, no diabetes, maybe slightly elevated cholesterol. She's a teacher. She's a mother of 3 children, and she enjoys running several times a week. Maria does not have a clinical diagnosis of obesity. And we are going to put Maria on something that is going to be called preclinical obesity. It's almost like, have you heard about the term pre-diabetes? You know, you're not diabetic, but you're pre-diabetic. You know, you're not obese, but you're preclinical obesity. So if you just go by the BMI, you will think, wow, Maria has obesity. But no, Maria is fine.
Yeah.
But then I'm going to introduce you to Jack, and I'm going to describe Jack for the listeners as well. So Jack has a BMI of 39, and I have a little drawing of Jack for the listeners. Jack is sitting down, holding his chest, holding his knees, struggling a little bit with his breathing because he gets fatigued. He gets significant shortness of breath. That's called dyspnea. Even on minimal exertion, you know, just by walking a little bit short distance. He has a lower limb edema, meaning that the legs are swollen because he's retaining more fluid. On the medical assessment, his heart function is reduced, so it's not normal. His pulmonary function is more restrictive. You know, he cannot do a good inflation of the lungs because of their obesity. He has severe sleep apnea. He uses a CPAP at home. He's not diabetic. He's currently unemployed, and he regrets not being able to play football with his son anymore because he just gets difficult. So yes, you can tell Jack has a BMI of 39, very similar than Maria, but Jack has clinical obesity because he has all the symptoms of obesity. This is the way that we're going to look at the difference in between Maria and Jack, because we're going to be able to measure not only the body fat that I told you at the beginning, but also the symptoms. And then we're going to put these two categories, one that is going to be called preclinical and one that is going to be clinical. And so let me stop sharing, and I am actually going to share another one that is also going to be very fun for your viewers, that explains where Maria and Jack fall into. So you can see that new diagram.
Yep.
So Maria and Jack had an elevated body weight or BMI, but it's also if you measure the conformation of fat, they both also have the body fat there. Wow. So they have the BMI, 37 and 39, and they have the fat. But, that same information, if you don't have the body fat and you just have the BMI, for example, you have a BMI of 37 and you don't have the body fat, that's a no. You are going to have no obesity. You see that boxer that I have there on the picture. And so for your listeners and not viewers, so I have a boxer, very muscular boxer. That muscular boxer can have a BMI of 35 easily with muscle, but doesn't have any fat mass.
Yeah.
So that person doesn't have obesity. Now let's move on to the segment of obesity. So they have the BMI and they have the fat. So that's obesity. But remember, Maria has no symptoms. And so she has preclinical obesity. Jack has all kinds of symptoms. So he has already the clinical obesity. Which one do you think is more urgent for us to take care of?
I mean, I'd like to say both, but I'm going to make the assumption that it's the one with clinical obesity. They're the ones that are needing the most help because they're suffering from the most amount of comorbidities.
You're totally right. Both need attention. You're totally right. But they are going to require different level of attention. So Jack is going to require a more intensive intervention. So you cannot only say, I'm going to start working with you on diet, exercise, lifestyle changes. I'm going to start working with you on minimal things. I think Jack deserves to have the opportunity to have a strong, evidence-based treatment. Could be the GLP-1s, could be metabolic and bariatric surgery, could be any of those treatments that are evidence-based that allow Jack to get rid of all these problems at that stage. As opposed to Maria. Maria is going to have a little bit more of a management instruction. So maybe we can control Maria as long as she doesn't have symptoms because it's not damaging her body. And maybe we can extend her lifespan and save those treatments when she gets a little bit sicker or before she starts getting very sick, and when we can determine by laboratory values that she may need to start getting those treatments.
What I see in this from my perspective is a powerful new model to talk about really metabolic wellness, right? With everybody in the world. You can go in to meet with your doctor, have these tests done, have these measurements done, but you're not necessarily having a conversation about something as big as surgery. What you are having a conversation about is, am I well, right? What is happening to me internally, metabolically? Could this affect me, or is this affecting my ability to live a long, healthy life? That's a very different conversation than just, you're fat or you have too much excess weight. Surgery is the only option here. This is a much more holistic approach that takes into account so many facets of people's life, not just their BMI.
Correct. It's just a way to treat the people individually.
Yes.
And not assume that everybody has the same degree of obesity and everybody behaves the same way. As you know, there are many things that affect and cause obesity. Is not only caused by eating, by activity, but it's also caused by genetics, psychology, even bacteria in your bowel, even the way that your metabolism works, even medication. So there's many factors that contribute to obesity. So not every single person has the same damage in their body. And not every single person needs the same treatment. So if we start figuring out these things and be more individual, we're going to be able to target who needs what.
Yeah.
This is the simplest way to do it. In the future, maybe we're going to have better scans and better genetics so we can just tailor more. This person has more metabolically resistant obesity, meaning that this is the person that is going to develop more aggressive diabetes and more aggressive liver disease and more aggressive sleep apnea. It's like cancer, like there's some people that present with a cancer and the cancer behaves more benign. And then people that can behave more aggressive. Or when a cancer presents on a person that is more younger. Let's talk about breast cancer, one of those cancers that is very common in women. So when the cancer presents on a younger woman, usually tends to be more aggressive than when it presents to an older woman. Meaning that it's just the cells are behaving in a very different way and they're becoming more aggressive. So same thing, there's people that have certain genetics that allows them to become more diseased with the obesity disease.
Which, makes sense. Every body is individual and how every body functions is individual. And I think for so many years, the treatment of obesity was very much the same for everybody. Once you cross this threshold, these were your options, but there was nothing up until that threshold. Now what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing from you is that there's this acknowledgement that this is a disease and it is going to progress differently throughout your life. And as soon as it really starts to impact you in any type of negative way, that's when you need to reach out to an obesity medicine specialist so that you can start having these conversations, because what's going to benefit you could be very different from what you're thinking in your mind, but it's going to be beneficial. But you're never going to know that unless you just make the appointment and start having these conversations.
And remember the way that obesity affects our body is not only organ dysfunction. It's not only having diabetes or high blood pressure or sleep apnea or heart problems, kidney problems, liver problems. It's also the quality of life, the limitations on daily activities. And so that's part of clinical obesity. That's part of, if you cannot do what Jack is not able to do, he wants to play with his kids, that's already clinical obesity. But, Maria still runs and is very active and doesn't have that dysfunction yet. And so it does need some management, but it's more of a preventive management to get it worse instead of, more aggressive treatment. Now, that doesn't mean that we should stop treating Maria, but, certainly, Jack needs more help and it's more intensive help and to take care of his problem.
I have a question because now this really has me thinking. I see myself in both of your examples. When I had my initial procedure, I was 326 pounds. I had chronic sleep apnea. I was on a CPAP machine. I was pre-diabetic, and it was absolutely impacting my ability to live life in the way that I wanted to. So I had surgery. Wonderful. I have since lost around 110 pounds. There were concerns in my labs that some of those comorbidities were returning, right? Elevated cholesterol, elevated A1C, right? My PCP was like, okay, something is going on here. And at that point, put me on a GLP-1 medication, right? So I had a high level of clinical obesity. My initial treatment brought that down to a lower level, but I was still suffering some of the effects of that. I went on a GLP-1, lost a significant amount of weight. I think it was maybe an additional 50 pounds. And then I lost access to it. And in 3 months, I regained 30 pounds. And with my new PCP that I've just started seeing, he recommended to me, he's like, this is not acceptable. This is the disease in action. I know that you're not doing anything wrong, but let's kind of run through a checklist of lifestyle changes and nutritional, all these things that you're doing. And at the end of that checklist, he said, wonderful, you are doing everything right. You still are fighting the disease of obesity. And my initial immediate recommendations are either we consider revisional surgery or we look for other medications, because I can't have you continue to gain such a rapid amount of weight in such a short amount of time. It's dangerous. It's not healthy. And I know you're not happy with it. But what he said after was really intriguing. And it kind of speaks to this commission and to what you're talking about. He said, okay, this is what we're going to do immediately. I want you to go downstairs. You're going to have all of this blood work done. And then next week, we're going to meet again. And based on that, I'm probably going to recommend that you go do some other tests, which he did. So I had a DEXA scan done. Mm-hmm. I had my resting metabolic rate tested, and I had my VO2 max tested. Combine those 3 tests with my blood results. I have been amazed at the care and attention that my PCP is putting towards me in this disease. I don't think he's an obesity medicine specialist, but he himself struggles with weight. He has a lot of bariatric patients who he sees. And he said, look at your data. He said, there's a lot to celebrate here. You have less than a 1% chance of a cardiovascular event happening in the next 10 years. Your lean mass is through the roof. Your bone density is some of the highest I've ever seen. He said, really holistically, you are doing phenomenally well. Let's look at your DEXA scan, though. I still see obesity very much present in your life. I have almost 2 pounds of visceral fat, and I have excess adipose. And he said, okay, here's 2 things that I want you to do. Your resting metabolic rate, your metabolism is absolutely being impacted by the disease of obesity. My RMR was only 1,300 calories, extremely low. And he said, we have to get that up again if we want to encourage your metabolism to function at a higher level. So that means the one thing I need you to really focus on is strength training. He said, don't listen to anything else. Don't watch anything else, but let's team up on this and let's take this one section of the disease of obesity. Let's focus on that for 6 months. Let's retest, reevaluate, and keep moving forward. But instead of him, coming and just saying, oh man, yeah, boy, this just sucks. Let's just, medication or revision. He went so much deeper, and he helped me understand how the disease was impacting me, not the general population. And that knowledge has helped me make some big changes in my life that I'm already feeling better from. But if he wouldn't have had that conversation, and if we wouldn't have really approached obesity in this way that you're talking about today, I would be stuck and frankly be feeling a little bit out of options.
So you got two things out of that evaluation. One is that you understood your body composition much better, which is something that you cannot get out of the BMI, which is the first limitation that we had before. Second thing that you got out of this, and you already know, I've seen you talking about this before in your other podcasts, is you understand that obesity is not curable. It's a chronic disease that is manageable. And so manageable means that you're going to have to manage it through your whole life because your body's already working in a way that tends to re get to that point, in which is the point that patients get frustrated all the time, and revisional surgery is not necessarily a bad option sometimes. GLP-1s is certainly not a bad option in other times. And some other times we don't need anything but just adjusting few minor things. Yeah. But, many things that of course, we can talk extensively, why do a patient need revisional surgery? Well, there's many reasons. One, the surgery can be with time. They need to be crafted and adjusted because either your pouch is larger, either because you need a little bit more, segment of your bowel that can limit that absorption and then create more metabolic influence on your body. But sometimes the medications, the new GLP-1s have demonstrated that can allow to recuperate that ability for the patient to start getting back on track. And so everybody's going to be different, and we're going to have to with time figure out what is the best solution. We don't have an answer right now on that because all the GLP-1s are new. And there's many in the pipeline. I can tell you, I'm so excited about the future. This is probably, if you were a person suffering from obesity and are listening to these podcasts, I cannot tell you that this is the most exciting times of managing obesity, because we have now more tools that actually work better. And in the pipeline, meaning on the next few years, we're going to have better and better tools. And so this is going to be super exciting. What I see in the next 3 to 5 years and 10 years, we're going to see a whole list of tools, medications and surgery, and the combination of both that allow us to be more able strongly to beat this disease. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to cure it, but we're going to be able to control. It's like when you have cancer, one more time, and then you have all this chemotherapy and you're trying to beat, and eventually the cancer kind of wins and boom, that's not good. And so now we have stronger chemotherapy and we're trying to beat the cancer. Perfect. That's what we have. We have better drugs and better surgery that is going to allow us to beat the disease. And when I say beat, it's just to make it under control for a longer time. And maybe you're never going to have to deal with this. I think this is the exciting times. It is what it is. We never had this kind of exciting treatments that we have right now.
The first person to actually ever talk to me about surgery was my husband. And I think we were just dating at the time. And he just very casually, not in any judgmental way, just said, have you ever thought about bariatric surgery? And my initial response was, oh no, that's for people who are 600 pounds, right? It's for the people who I watch on TV. So I really let these false narratives about surgery exist in my life without ever really pushing back on those, on that narrative. And I don't regret when I had surgery. Oftentimes people say, oh, I should have had it earlier. I feel amazing now after surgery. I just wish more people would be more open to pushing aside those narratives and just make an appointment with an obesity medicine specialist. I now understand I have a chronic and lifelong disease. This is going nowhere. It is the roommate in my life. But I can either be mad at it, I can ignore it, I can try to push it away, and that's not going to work. It's only going to empower the disease to be more active in my life. Or I can face it head on and acknowledge that just like every other disease out there, if it reoccurs in my life, I should not feel bad or ashamed that I need to onboard new treatment. I have plenty of family members who have had cancer multiple times. And when their cancer recurred, never did I think, well, that was your fault. Well, you ate too many fried foods, or you did too. No, it's not even a question. So when I started struggling with weight reoccurrence and this recurrence of these obesity symptoms, I did kind of start to go down that negative pathway of beating myself up and blaming myself. That's not the case at all. No. This is a lifelong and chronic disease. And now that I have all of this data that I can work with, it has put me in the most powerful position I've ever think that I've been in when it comes to treating this disease. Before I had surgery, but now I have so many other tools that I can use.
So this is part of what you've been talking about also in another podcast. The stigma and bias against obesity is so tremendous. Like you stated, nobody is going to tell a patient with a heart attack with plaques in the arteries, why do you have all that much cholesterol there, or a smoker with lung cancer? Why you smoke? You just go and treat it and that's it. And people are not afraid of going into treatment because they think that they're going to die. But in obesity, people are, even the patients that are suffering from obesity, they're afraid of saying, I'm under treatment, or I'm going to have surgery, or I'm taking this medication. Because they know that somebody's going to criticize them. I say, you're going to take the easy way out. They're going to do this. I mean, there's so much stigma and bias against the disease and against the treatments. which is
Yes.
devastating. Both things are so much stigma and bias. And that's why it's important, April. We have recently a big meeting that is called the Obesity Summit. We got together about 100 people representing about 40 different organizations. Some of them dedicated to obesity and some of them not dedicated to obesity, but they deal with obesity. For example, the president of the Society for Sleep Apnea. They see all the time patients with sleep apnea, and what is the most common cause they have is obesity, and what they tell them, go and lose weight. The president of the American Heart Association. Well, yeah, you have heart disease, and many of that is caused by being overweight, and so on and so forth. All these clinical societies all together in a room, and we start addressing. So one of the biggest things that we have is that the therapies that we have for obesity are the most underutilized therapies. Can you imagine if I tell you that only 1 to 2% of the diabetics are receiving treatment, or only 1 to 2% of the patients suffering from heart disease are receiving treatment for heart, or only 1 to 2% of the patients with a gallbladder disease are receiving treatment? That is not true. Most of them are receiving treatment. Even the ones that don't have insurance, they end up showing to the ER and they receive treatment. I mean, that's part of the messed up of our health care system, but it is what it is. But if you show up to the ER with obesity, you're not going to receive treatment for obesity. And it's only 1 to 2% of the people are receiving treatment for obesity. It's pretty devastating. I mean, it's just so ridiculous to have those small numbers. So one of the biggest things that we have in that summit is awareness. Awareness of what we do. Awareness not only of the stigma and bias, awareness of the disease of obesity, awareness of the therapies that are available. I wish we had the pockets that these big drug companies have. You turn on the TV and what you see, Wegovy and Zepbound and Ozempic and all these drugs. But never talk about surgery, never talk about all this, because we don't have those pockets. Your patients, my patients, any patients that have received the treatment could be the biggest source of awareness, and we haven't tapped into that. Can you imagine if the about 200,000+ patients that are receiving surgery in the United States per year, each one of them can join the Obesity Action Coalition or share the story, and that story can be shared by somebody else. So like one person share the story, 2 people share the story, 4 people. I mean, it's like a pyramid. That spread of the story is massive. So the president of IFSO, my colleague and friend, is Ricardo Cohen. He's from Brazil. He has this initiative this year. He wants to do a worldwide awareness of the problem using patients' testimonials. And why we're doing that? Because we don't have a big budget. Why we're doing that? Because we don't have the budget that the Medicare pharma companies have. Pharma companies have a lot of money. And so we're going to do that. We're going to ask patients, not only from the United States, we're going to ask patients from Europe, from Latin America, and we're going to create videos in Spanish, in French, in English, and we're going to spread the word. We're going to help to spread the word through different sources. And maybe by the people start seeing that, and we're going to guide these people to do good videos. Everybody can share the story, but sometimes the videos can, if they're not good quality, people, just slip it over and they don't. So it's much better to have good lighting. It's much better to have good microphone, the voice, and not too long. So can you explain all that in 1 minute? Some people like to talk for more than 1 minute, like you and me can talk for an hour, and then we can still have many things to talk about it, but short videos that you can send a message. If you're a patient and you're listening, can you do that for us? Can you create in 1 minute a video in which you can put a before picture? You can tell us in 1 minute how your life changed from when you were this way and now you are this way, and what you did briefly, how much that changed your life, how much that's exciting. get good lighting, get good audio, and you can do it at home. I mean, I think the best way to do it is not necessarily sitting down in front of a computer. That's probably the easiest way to do it. But if you can get somebody else to videotape you, get another person with a phone, with an iPhone. You just go in and videotape you walking out and talking with a good microphone and a good lighting during the day. You can practice that way. Or inside your house, in the kitchen, how you're changing the way that you cook now or buy stuff. And in 1 minute, you can send a message that is attractive, appealing. Videos can always be modified a little bit by putting captions, by putting a message from this patient. So Maria has this message for you. Jack has this message for you. And this is almost like a social media commercials that in a low budget system, this is what we have. And why people need to help us do that? Because there are many of you that are out there that are not seeking help because of ignorance. They just don't know. They just don't know what they're missing out. They just don't understand it because there's not enough awareness. So they think that maybe they don't need it. Maybe they need to be 600 pounds to get treatment. The 600 pound shows makes it unrealistic. Those are the patients that are already too far out in the disease, so people need care way before the 600 pounds. And so there's many ways that we can use those videos to help out. I'm going to reach out to April actually, and I'm going to make that formal request at some point because I know you have a lot of people that follow you. And then
I was going to say, Dr. Ponce, we have a whole nation. We got thousands of people who are excited to share their story because as patients, this is what makes me, and I know so many of us listening and watching, so happy. The reason we all made the commitment to have surgery was not necessarily because we were told by our doctors that we needed to have surgery. We made the commitment because we connected with another patient who is successfully living their life after bariatric surgery in the most joyful ways. That's it. At last year's ASMBS conference, Dr. Ann Rogers, I was in a meeting with her and she just point blank said, look, the only way that you are going to get more people going through this treatment is if you have them talk with other patients. Patients need other patients. They need to know what can be done. Yeah. And that is the most powerful message. And I think what holds us back as patients, now this is just me from my own lived patient experience, but I have a sneaking suspicion this is what's adding to it. Even if you are doing everything right, there's this voice in the back of your head that's saying you're not doing it right. You ate some Cheetos last week. You sat on the couch like a couch potato and did nothing. I could run through 1,000 things that I have done recently that would make me a bad, and I'm putting this in air quotes, bariatric patient. And I was beating myself up really for years. And what has helped me change that is when I got these test results back and my new PCP said, girl, you really are doing amazing. There are some tweaks that we need and should make here to help you with your overall health and longevity. But I need you to hear this. You are healthy. You are well. You are doing all the right things. And it was like this light bulb went off in my head. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I really am doing things right. One meal here, one snack here, one day of being lazy, one day of not so great mental health is not going to derail this progress that I've made. And I felt so scared to kind of share these things. But now that I have the data, for me, it's like, okay, guys, look, what you're doing is just life, but we are doing things right. And if we are focusing on our bariatric life, if we're living those pillars, movement, mindset, metabolic wellness, community, if we're doing those things, we are treating and managing the disease. Sure, it's going to look a little bit different from all of us, but I'm not where I was 5.5 years ago, and neither is anybody else that I know. So these stories of regular life, I think, have an ability to really break something loose in people's brains. It's not about being perfect after bariatric surgery. It's about learning how to do all these things that we already know how to do a little bit differently. And we back those decisions with data that shows that we are making progress and we are treating the disease. It's not this all or nothing mindset. It is a yes and. Yes, I'm treating the disease and I continue to live life in a way that brings me joy. Those are the stories that I think are really going to resonate with people who are battling obesity and don't know what to do.
Correct. A lot of people don't understand, and people are suffering from obesity and they blame themselves. Correct. They blame themselves because they think, I am the one that is a failure because I'm trying to eat less. I'm trying to exercise. They should not blame themselves. It's like somebody that has cancer and blaming themselves. I mean, this is a disease because if you think about it, the hormones are the ones that are messing them up. It's amazing. They get more hungry because they have more ghrelin. That's the hunger hormone. They get less satisfied because they have less GLP-1. That's the GLP-1 that is produced on the drugs. Their metabolism is lower. And so put it in three big buckets to explain it very simple. So less of the GLP-1, more of the ghrelin, and metabolism that is not working well is a bad combination. If you add that to genetics, if you add that to the environment, it puts into big problems. So these patients are not understanding that their body is messed up. The body needs help. And actually we have treatment. Why do you think the drugs work? Because they're actually giving you more of the good hormone, the GLP-1s. They're making you more satisfied and less hungry. And surgery gives you also blocks the bad hormone, which is the ghrelin. It makes us be more hungry. That imbalance, if you think about it, a person that is more overweight, when it tries to lose weight, they get 3 to 4 times more hungry than a person that only needs to lose 10 pounds.
Yeah.
And so they're fighting to a bigger enemy. It's devastating.
Dr. Ponce, I have one final question for you, and it's a bit of a two-parter.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, what do you recommend? Like, if somebody is listening or watching this conversation and they maybe have never considered surgery, or they knew about it, but they just don't think it's right for them, what message do you really want them to take away from this conversation?
I think if you are sitting down and listen to this and you think that you're suffering from obesity, I want you to go to a website and look for a specialist. There's many websites that can find a specialist. I'm going to list you 3 websites that you can find specialists. 2 in the United States, which is the asmbs.org. And you go to the asmbs.org and you go to the section for patients, and you're going to find a specialist on every place in the United States that can give you access to the different treatments options. The other one is the OAC, the Obesity Action Coalition. Obesity Action Coalition, will give you specialties not only from surgery, but also from obesity medicine in different ways. But what I want you to do is to go and look at the one that is in your town, the one that is in your place, and look and see if they offer all treatments. I don't want you to go to a place in which you're only offering surgery or you're only offering medications, because what's going to happen, you're going to get that. You're going to get medications or surgery. And you may not be that person. You need to go to a place in which you go to a physician that is offering surgery, but is also certified in obesity medicine. So for example, myself, I am a bariatric surgeon certified by the American Board of Surgery, but also I am an American Board of Obesity Medicine diplomat. And I have a whole team, a nurse practitioner, a dietitian, that the only thing that they do is obesity medicine in my clinic. And so what we do is combine the efforts. Patients may be treated with this, patients may be treated with both. And we also do other treatments, endoscopic treatments and so on and so forth. But those are the main big buckets that you need to look for. And so look carefully, do your research, look at the websites. For example, and I'm just going to give you an example. This is not an advertisement, but look at my website. And this is a website that offers clearly, when you start seeing the website, it offers all the treatments. And so if you have a similar website in Wisconsin or in California that you see all those are the places you need to go. And then look at your certifications. If this physician certified by the American Board of Medicine and by the ASMBS and bariatric surgeons, they are offering all the treatments in one. They're not going to offer you one or the other one. My website is, weight loss chat with 2T's.com. So it's funny, but I'm in Chattanooga, so you don't have to come to Chattanooga, but this is just to give you an idea of what are you going to need to look at websites and how they need to look like.
Yep. And all of these, friends, are linked in the description of this show. So if you open up the show notes and you kind of look towards the middle or the bottom of the page, you're going to see all of these wonderful resources that Dr. Ponce is recommending for you to check out. And if you need help or guidance or you're looking for a cheat sheet, just let us know. You can actually email us at hello@barianation.com. We're here to also help guide you through this process. We understand how overwhelming it can feel. We also know that the hardest step that we take along this journey is that initial outreach. It can be really scary because you just don't know what's going to meet you on the other side of it. We are absolutely here to help you through that.
Yes, that is totally true. I mean, sometimes patients say, "Hi, Dr. Ponce, I finally meet you. You're so famous. You're so," and then I say, I'm very nervous. I say, you know what? Don't be nervous. This is a friendly environment. We all are going to here to take care of you. The reason that I choose to do this is to see people are walking to the door of my clinic, walking. I mean, they're suffering from obesity, but they're walking. I mean, they're not like dying. And so what we need to do is to help them to get better. It's a happy place. It's a place in which I enjoy at 1 year when they come and give me a hug, when they come and tell me I can cross my legs, I can wear the clothes that I wanted to wear. And now, Dr. Ponce, I can run a 5K. I never thought in my life that I could do that. I can go up in steps. I can go and travel without asking a seatbelt extenders. I can go with my kids and go to an amusement park and do it. All those things are the reasons that we do this, because of the rewarding of seeing the patient changing their life. And you see patients, I mean, things as simple as I've seen female patients that say, Dr. Ponce, I have never, ever in my life have a guy open the door for me. And now they do. So you don't do that for that reason. You don't do the surgery for that reason. You don't do the treatment for that reason, but it's the pleasures in life comes as minimal as this, it is amazing how people tell me all the time. The biggest regret that I have is why I didn't do it sooner. Why I didn't come and see you sooner. Why I didn't ask for help sooner. Many people staying at home and they wait longer and longer and longer. Why? Because of the bias and the stigma. And so come sooner. April knows that, April, and I wanted to congratulate you because putting this podcast and the work that you're doing is a massive work to create awareness. And we need more of that. We need more Aprils in the world to spread the word out. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I have a whole nation that is walking this journey with me, and I would be thrilled to introduce you to them because it is a powerful group of individuals who understand the life-saving and life-giving impact that treatment can have on our lives. And we want everybody who's suffering from the disease of obesity or in that preclinical. Everybody deserves the treatment. And it doesn't matter on what you think you've done in your life to cause it. You haven't. And that shame is keeping you stuck. And the only thing that is going to move you forward is to get curious and to get brave and make that appointment. Tap into a community. If you are nervous about it, if you are just scared to make that next step, there are organizations out there. Hi, we're Berry Nation, designed to help you take that first step. This disease is not meant to be battled alone. And you really have to put yourself in your own hero's journey story here. You have to take that first step. You have to get brave. You have to get curious. But we are here to help you every step of the way, along with doctors who are like Dr. Ponce here. They believe in you. They want you to get the treatment that you need and deserve. And they're here to partner with you. You just have to take that leap of faith and do it.
Exactly. You have to take, when a patient shows up in the office, they have taken the biggest step in the world, which is showing up in the office. That's when they're asking for help. And we're ready to help them. This is what we do. This is what we enjoy doing it. And, thank you very much, April, for inviting us to this. This is very, very pleasant to have this conversation. This is nice.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I know everybody is leaving with new information, no matter where you are in your bariatric journey. And friends, please absolutely check out the amazing resources that Dr. Ponce has shared with us in those show notes. You can follow him, reach out to him directly. As you can tell, he is here to help patients everywhere. So if you'd like to further connect with him, all of that's going to be linked in our show notes. Dr. Ponce, thank you so much for your time today. This was amazing.
Thank you very much, April. Thank you.
That wraps up another empowering episode of the Bari Nation podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, keep the conversation going by joining the Bari Nation membership community, where you can attend live support events, access on-demand resources, and find a caring community.
Join us at barination.mn.co. If you found this podcast valuable, help us produce it by becoming a $5 monthly supporter at barinationpodcast.com.
And just remember, at the end of the day, you've got this, we've got you, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.